Hey, I'm Antoinette, and for today's reset, I want to talk to you about the communication crisis that is putting us all behind. Let's jump in. Welcome back to the Midday Reset, friends. And yes, today I do want to talk to you about society's doublespeak. I don't think we're being honest about the root causes to many of the issues plaguing us right now. The reason COVID is so out of control again in the US is that the US Health Department has not delivered clear messaging on the virus at all since the start of the pandemic in 2020, which allowed this issue of the pandemic, this virus that spreads very easily, becoming very politicized and thus monetized by entertainers, creators, politicians, business owners, people with special interests. We weren't told the truth about these vaccines, not in a way that would make it stick, okay? They were never a forever cure, and they're not fail-safe. But people treating them as though they are is creating a separate but equal vibe that I'm seeing. People are acting like the spread of COVID cases is happening only because of the people who are unvaccinated. And I'm sorry to break it to you, but that is simply not true. People who are vaccinated are also capable of spreading the virus. That includes the Delta variant, Lambda variant, everything out there that you can contract that is COVID related. The vaccine gave us a boost in immunity against the vaccine. So, our defenses are much stronger in fighting against it. But they didn't tell the truth about them not being 100%. And that's part of the problem that we're having here. And I see it in airport signage and headlines. People feel that their rights are being violated, but people are also shunning each other on the basis of whether or not someone has been vaccinated. And I just wonder why it is that we have set ourselves on a path like this after so many people got out and passionately marched and raged and peacefully protested about equality and liberty last year after George Floyd's murder. So we had people in droves. Just to recap, we had people in droves showing up to peacefully protest the mistreatment of people of color by the police force last year. We had a huge public outcry about discrimination last year. And now this year, we are shunning people on the basis of whether or not they have had a vaccination. A vaccine that I have to tell the truth about is not 100% fail-safe, and it doesn't prevent you from spreading the virus. That's where we're at. We also like to tell women that they need to grow a voice, they need to have opinions, and they need to voice those and stand in them and raise their voices. But it seems like when women do actually speak up, we only are truly interested in listening to what they have to say if what they're saying doesn't challenge what we need to hear too much. And so if a woman is speaking up and talking about abuse, and it's just so shocking to everyone else that, oh my gosh, I didn't know that she was suffering in silence. I didn't know that this was all happening behind the scenes, and I just had no clue. All of a sudden, for a second, people will be fascinated and, oh my goodness, look at this. She's talking about her plight. She's so brave, etc. And then we just kind of move on from it once we get tired of hearing about it. Once other women start raising their voices and saying, yes, this has happened to me too. Yes, this happened to me as well, and I tried to tell you. All of a sudden now it's, well, we don't need to pile on the negativity. We don't need to wallow in the past. We don't need to stay stuck on old news. That's what it seems like. But yet we are encouraging women and people, especially marginalized people, to raise their voice and to stand in their power. But we only like their power and their voice when it actually serves us. Once it stops serving us, then it seems like we don't want to hear from it anymore. And the us, of course, is collective, but the machine, that elusive machine that many people refer to, that's a lot of what does the either accepting or the shunning. That's a lot of what's in charge of the cancel culture machine. And I wrote this part in my notes as even when, but I actually think I meant to say especially when, or not especially when, but especially in entertainment. We seem really interested in uplifting fabrications and get publicly offended when those fabrications get called out for being fake. It's again the emperor's new clothes, and this practice discourages the truth tellers among us because they are the ones who ultimately end up facing the backlash for telling the truth. One example I can think about is how social media made a 9-year-old girl so famous, then got angry when it all came tumbling down and we found out that she actually has to go to school and she has a concerned parent who doesn't want her all over social media. Amazing, right? Little Tay got on Instagram claiming to own expensive cars, claiming to have copious amounts of cash, and she knew the exact prices to things like toilets and pieces of furniture. She would recite these in her videos. And people praised this. They laughed and got their friends to watch along. Then the truth eventually came out. Little Tay's mom is a real estate agent who has access to nice properties, which often include things like nice cars and nice amenities like pools and hot tubs, which allowed her children to stage these sensational videos that filled her Instagram. My own daughter will be 8 soon, and as such, in raising her, I have been able to identify and see the benefits of maintaining a connection to reality in the process of raising her. Both me and her father are both committed to making sure that our children have a childhood, of course, but that they also grow up with a realistic sense of what the world is like. We don't like to practice toxic positivity in our household, and we do our best to stay away from cognitive dissonance. Of course, part of that is also being aware that you're practicing cognitive dissonance. That's part of it, how we keep each other accountable. But I digress. We know that it's not going to be helpful to put an 8-year-old behind the wheel of an expensive car. It's just not practical. It's not realistic. 8-year-olds can't drive. 8-year-olds are supposed to be playing with dolls and outside with their bikes and scooters. Maybe they have Power Wheels. That's what 8-year-olds are supposed to be doing. I can hear my kids outside right now splashing in the pool. 8-year-olds are supposed to be jumping around playing in the pool safely, of course, during the summertime. They don't need to be sitting behind the wheel of a Maserati or a Lamborghini because that's just not realistic. It's not practical. Now, this is not me saying that if somebody who is rich has an 8-year-old, they shouldn't ever let their 8-year-old see their expensive car. No, not at all. That's not what I'm saying. But again, if you were listening to what I just said in the last few minutes, you would know that Little Tay's situation was not like that. She was fronting for the gram because the people around her knew that it would garner them popularity. But what I don't like is that our culture, our society embraced that. We grabbed that up and we pretended that it was real and that it was cool and it was okay and not problematic in the slightest. And then when it came out that her father didn't want her on social media, he was actually working to get custody of her, and that this was actually a bone of contention between the mother and the father, both of Tay's parents, who are no longer in a relationship. It seems like the public responded to that with outcry. They wanted to claim that all of a sudden now this parent who was expressing concern and who was pulling his child away from the public eye, there was concern that he was somehow abusing her. And that once again is evidence of society's double speak and also where cognitive dissonance is getting us, because you should not be concerned when a parent is saying, I don't want the public looking at my child. I don't want my child having this persona out here that is highly problematic. That's what parents are supposed to do. You should have been calling the Child Protective Services and the police when you saw that Little Tay was standing on top of a Lamborghini and that she had fired up the engine of a Bentley and was getting ready to drive out of a parking garage in it. That's when you should have been calling Child Protective Services, but somehow we've gotten to a place in our society where the opposite is what garners the concern. And so I just think that where all of this is leading to is that we're going to have a population of people who have a problem with the truth. We already have quite a large population of people who have a problem with the truth. There is a large population of people who right now are still vehemently in opposition of the result of the election that we had in the United States last year. So that in and of itself is an illustration of the fact that we have people who are not interested in the truth. They have a real serious problem with the truth. And when you have people who have a problem with the truth, That does not look good for a population of people. I believe that that is part of, along with the public health department not doing its job, that is another part of why this pandemic has been so difficult for us to get under control here in the United States. People do not want to be told what to do. They do not want to have their rights and their freedoms, and I'm using air quotes here. They don't want to have those trampled. And the reason I'm using air quotes is because people will claim that their rights and their freedoms and their liberties are being taken away from them in one instance, but in other instances where it's very clear that your rights and your freedoms are being stripped from you, they don't seem to have a problem. I did not hear public outcry in the wake of 9/11 about the Patriot Act. People seemed very invested in making sure that we protect ourselves with the Patriot Act. Now here we are almost 20 years later, and I don't see where much has changed in the world other than a steady, rapid deterioration of our rights, of our freedoms, of our securities, of our media, about our media literacy, and whether or not people walking around with the power to vote, with the power to purchase, with the power to sell, don't actually know the difference between what's the truth and what's fake. And part of that has been orchestrated by people who are very wealthy and very well connected to create messages that sway people in a certain direction. The fact that no one's getting upset about that frightens me. Because I remember very clearly when the Patriot Act got signed into law, it became a thing that all of a sudden now your relatives can't come inside the airport with you to go to the gate when you're flying out. They have to wait beyond the security checkpoint. You know, all of the things that became suddenly open to public record about our person, about who we are as people, those records now becoming available all in the name of fighting terrorism. No one is speaking out against these things, yet people want to claim that their rights and their freedoms and their liberties are being trampled on. I don't disagree, but are you certain that you are conscientious of all of the ways that that is happening? Because some of you, some of us, this is not accusatory, I include myself with this, some of us are accepting the very behaviors that we claim to not like, and that's problematic for our population. The problems we claim to want to eradicate are not going to go anywhere. People who have been marginalized or misunderstood are going to continue to be so because we have a population built with systems that are not actually interested in listening to the concerns of people who are marginalized. It just claims to be concerned with that because the optics of that are good for business and capitalism. We will never overturn the corruption that plagues us as long as we allow corrupt people to spin lies that we base our culture on. We've got to figure out a way to get back to figuring out how we can tell the truth and the lies apart from each other again. We've lost that. When our media became compromised, I believe that we lost that tremendously because the media used to function as a body and entity for keeping people accountable. If you didn't want your name to be slandered in the news because you lied about the working conditions in your factories, or you lied about whether or not you knew that there were harmful chemicals in the baby formula that your company was selling, you actually had to do the work and do the due diligence and have the integrity. You had to do that in order to avoid having your name be slandered and get canceled, so to speak. Now, people know that they can get away with these things because the media in our country will not hold them accountable. It will not hold them responsible. And it will print lies without retractions. Or the retractions will appear tiny on the back of page 9, whereas the lie was printed front page in bold above the fold. It's just what I see. So I encourage each of you out there, make sure that you are practicing discernment and applying critical thinking. Those skills in critical thinking that were taught to us in school, I know we didn't have a lot of lessons on them, but they were taught to us in school and they are still useful and relevant, especially as you make your way through this world where fact and fiction are really starting to blur quite a bit, especially as technology becomes more advanced. So, my friends, stay always critical. You don't have to make decisions quickly. You don't have to, fire off the cuff. If you need to take time to process and think about things, that's a good thing. I applaud you for that. Take care. Keep shining. Let me know what you thought of the episode. You can send me an email. Write to me at hi@missantoinette.net. That's MSANTOINETTE.net. And you can also follow me on Instagram at Miss Antoinette Chanel. Again, MSANTOINETTECHANEL. I love hearing from you. All right, take care, my loves. I'll talk to you soon.